thumbs up कर देना. Welcome to SRIRAM's IAS. So today we'll take up our earlier session and we'll proceed further, and probably this is the last session of history part, okay, including modern, art and culture, medieval and ancient. So all these parts, so we'll be taking up probably the last session. So this session will be about medieval India, okay. Very less questions come out of medieval India, but whenever it comes, it becomes really hard for students to solve those questions. So in order to understand the trend of those particular questions, we'll have to look into each and every question which has come in previous years in UPSC Civil Services Exam Prelims. Okay. So without wasting any time, let's proceed to question number 1. Now, let's look into question number 1 first. I would request you all to read this question first before solving it. Okay. So this question basically says that consider the following statements in the revenue administration of Delhi Sultanate. Now try to understand the revenue administration. Basically this question deals with what were the various officers which are deputed and when were they were deputed during the medieval period. And this question talks about, it's a cross, we can say, generational question. It takes into account Delhi Sultanate officers as well as Mughal rulers also. Okay, and that's how this question will get really confusing for you, because these all are Indo-Islamic terms and most probably they came from West Asia and Middle East portion. So that's why these terms sound as if they were in Delhi Sultanate also as well as Mughal administration also. So in order to tackle these questions, you need to have understanding about the stark differences between the Sultanate period as well as the Mughal period. So that's why the first statement says that in the revenue administration of Delhi Sultanate, the in charge of revenue collection was known as Amil. Now who was Amil? This statement is of course correct. Now Amil basically collected revenue and he worked, he only, so he worked under the office of Diwan-e-Wijarat. Diwan-e-Wijarat, which basically we can say that succeeded into the office of Wazir. Okay, so the revenue collection part was taken care of by Diwan-e-Wijarat office, and under him Amil used to take care in the Iktas. Okay, single, you can say Ikta was basically a province, we can't call it province even, it was an administrative unit in which Amil used to take care of revenue collection and all these kind of stuff. So the first statement is correct. Now what about the second statement? The second statement says the Ikta system of Sultans of Delhi was an ancient indigenous institution. No. When we say that ancient indigenous institutions, we mean that these institutions existed in India earlier also. But no such institution was prevalent or was present in India before the Sultanate, Delhi Sultans came into existence. And for most practical purposes, Muhammad Ghori, and after that Iltutmish, okay, Iltutmish from Mamluk dynasty, he was responsible for introducing Iktas. Okay, Iktas, they took reference from Abbasid dynasty in this case, and this was a prevalent thing in West Asian part. So that's why this statement is incorrect. It's not indigenous at all. Now what about the next statement? The office of Mir Bakshi came into existence during the reign of Khalji Sultans of Delhi. Now again this statement is wrong. Why this is wrong? This is wrong because Mir Bakshi came into existence during Mughal administration and most probably during the Akbar's reign. So that's why this statement is also wrong. That's what I'm trying to tell you is that these terms, they might sound that they would be present during Sultanate period as well as Mughal administration, but it's not true. So these kind of differences, these kind of stark differences, you need to remember, you need to know before attempting the paper. So that's why the correct statement here is, and the correct answer is 1 only. Now let's proceed to the next question. Now next question is about the various saints which lived during the medieval period of our country. And the first statement says that, first of all, look into the question. Now, the first statement says that Saint Nimbark was contemporary of Akbar. Okay, Nimbarka and Nimbarkacharya. He was during contemporary to Akbar, which is of course wrong. Now, who was Saint Nimbark? Nimbark was a proponent of Dvait Advait. Now, what is Dvait Advait? See, these are two, what we can say, we can call it an oxymoron because there are two exactly opposite terms which have been joined together, conjoined, and a new particular philosophy has came into existence, Dvait Advait. But what it says basically, it says that Atman and Brahma, okay, these are two distinct things, but they are also one. Like sun and rays. A ray without sun has no existence, and the sun without rays has no existence. So, this was different from Vedant given by Shankaracharya. But this basically says that both of them are distinct features, but still they are Dvait, two. But along with being two distinct, they are one. Dvait Advait. Okay. So Nimbark, Saint Nimbark or Nimbarkacharya was a proponent of Dvait Advait, and he was not at all contemporary of Akbar. Okay. Almost he existed during 11th to 13th century. Of course, various other sources give different timeline for Nimbarkacharya, but he basically lived during 11th to 13th century, during, we can say, during the Bhakti Kal, when Bhakti Kal was in its starting phase. So, at that period, Saint Nimbark gave Dvait Advait philosophy. Now, the second statement says, Saint Kabir was greatly influenced by Sheikh Ahmad Sarhindi. Now, see how UPSC is testing your knowledge. Try to understand. This question is not talking about contemporary and all those things, because that a person might not be knowing. But if you know the philosophy behind Sant Kabir and Sheikh Ahmad Sarhindi, then you will be very easily able to solve this particular question, because they had opposing views towards religion. Sheikh Ahmad Sarhindi was of course basically a proponent of a Sufi silsila called Naqshbandi. Now, why this particular Sufi silsila is important? It is important because it was very orthodox by its nature. Okay, it asked people to go back to roots. Okay, go back to their roots, and it, of course, it was against Akbar's tolerance policies, and it also asked the Mughal ruler at that period of time that Sharia should be implemented in a very strict way. So, if you will look into the ideologies of these two people, Kabir is of course a proponent of non-orthodoxy or radical thoughts or these kind of things. Okay, he was equally against both the, we can say, rituals of both Hindu and Islamic religion. Okay, so these people, these two saints, or we can call them that these are diagonally opposite as far as the spectrum of religious tolerance is concerned. So this is of course wrong. Now, why again Naqshbandi is very important? See, Naqshbandi was the Sufi silsila to which Aurangzeb belonged to. Okay, Aurangzeb had a great inclination towards Naqshbandi silsila, and that's why he took his references of religious intolerance and these kind of things from Naqshbandi silsila only. So that's why Naqshbandi silsila is very important. There are other Sufi silsilas also, like Chisti, okay, like Qadri, and these kind of Sufi silsilas are there. Chisti is most probably the most tolerant one. We know that Muhyiddin Chisti ki dargah, which is in Ajmer, he is a proponent of that. Apart from that, in India, in Delhi itself, Nizamuddin Auliya, he also belonged to Chisti silsila. So these are few examples of Chisti silsila which was tolerant in nature. But other Sufi silsilas like Naqshbandi, we can say that they were a bit we can say they were not tolerant at all, and they were orthodox by nature, and they always asked people or their followers to go back to real form of Islam or towards the Sharia law. Okay, so both the statements are correct, so the incorrect, so the correct answer is D. Fine. Now the next question, with reference to Mia Tansen, it's a very good question. See, you might have heard about Tansen or the Navratna of Akbar's court. So one of them was Tansen. A lot of theories, or we can say legends, have been associated with Tansen. So this question is about Tansen. So whenever you come across these kind of terms in pop culture even, try to go and explore about them. It basically will help you in exam also. Don't waste too much time into that, but you should be at least knowing that what was his actual name and who Tansen, which particular things Tansen did during the Akbar's reign and how religious was he. And in this perspective, when you start looking at things, then you will be very much equipped to solve these kind of questions during the actual exam. Okay, so this statement says that which of the statements given is correct about Mia Tansen? Not correct. Okay, not correct. Not correct is the keyword here. Which particular statement is not correct about Mia Tansen? The first statement says Tansen was the title given to him by Emperor Akbar. Okay, so without proceeding further, I can say that this statement is incorrect. Tansen title was not given by Emperor Akbar. Akbar Basha didn't give Tansen title of Tansen to Tansen. Tansen basically was earlier Ramantu Pandey. Okay, and later on he also we can say worked under the patronage of Maharaja of Rewa. And later on, due to his musical prowess, Akbar requested Maharaja of Rewa to send Tansen to his court as a Navratna. Okay, so which title Akbar then gave to Tansen? He gave the title of Mia. This thing was given by Akbar, not the name Tansen. So the first statement itself is incorrect. But let's talk about other statements also. The next statement says Tansen composed Drupad on Hindu gods and goddesses. Of course, this is right. These kind of rag he composed after Hindu deities like Ram and Krishna. Okay, Lord Ram and Lord Krishna. So these kind of deities were basically his reference point while composing these rag. Okay. Now the next statement is Tansen composed songs on his patrons. Of course, all these court poets were working under the patronage of kings. So they had to do all these things, and they did it on their choice also, by their choice also. But it is quite obvious that court poets will have to write for their patrons because they need to appease those patrons so that they will be given a lot of gifts, they will be given a lot of money and other such luxuries. Okay. So C is also correct. Now Tansen invented many rag. Of course, he composed many rag. Tansen was known for a lot of rags which were introduced in Hindustani classical music. Mia ki Todi, Mia ki Malhar. Okay, these kind of rag were introduced by Tansen only. Mia ki Malhar, it is very much known that Mia ki Malhar, when Tansen used to sing in Fatehpur Sikri, fort of Fatehpur Sikri, then it used to rain. So that's why these kind of rag are very important as far as art and culture part of Indian history is concerned. So this statement is also right. So the incorrect one is A, and the correct answer for this question is also A. Okay, let's move to the next question. Who among the following Mughal emperors shifted emphasis from the illustrated manuscripts to album and individual portraits? Okay, earlier illustrated manuscripts were used, and later on in the Mughal what we can say in the Mughal whole empire, the albums and individual portraits started getting into picture, which were naturalistic by nature. They were individualistic by nature. They were not pertaining to a large incident, but to a specific incident. And this particular turn of events started happening during Jahangir's rule. Okay, during Humayun and Akbar, of course, we can say painting came into picture in Mughal Empire. But Jahangir was the one who made it more naturalistic by nature. So that's why the correct answer to this question is of course Jahangir. Okay, and this thing persisted even during Shah Jahan. But what happened during Aurangzeb? Aurangzeb didn't like all these things, and under him only all the various court artisans, court poets had to flee away from Delhi and go to the lesser kings during those particular era, and there they got patronage, and still the art and culture part of Indian history started propagating even after that. It didn't stop, it just that it stopped getting patronage from the Mughal emperor itself. So that's why they would have faced some issues, but later on they persisted somehow so that their expertise is not gone, their expertise is still exists, and so that's why the correct answer to this question is Jahangir, which persisted till Shah Jahan, but during Aurangzeb's period, these all things literally disappeared from the Mughal court. Okay. Now the next question is, regarding the taxation system of Krishnadev Rai. First read the question Okay, then we'll discuss it. Now, what this question says that regarding the taxation system of Krishnadev, the ruler of Vijayanagar, consider the following statements. See, again, I'll remind you all that these all themes which are very much recurring in UPSC exams, you need to take extra care of such themes like Islamic, like you can say Sultanate period, later on Mughal period, then Krishnadev Rai. Okay, we already took a lot of questions about Krishnadev Rai or Vijayanagar Empire in the earlier sessions also. So give extra importance to these particular periods and these particular empires so that you'll be able to solve such questions in exam. Okay, these are important themes that keep on repeating in UPSC. Okay, so you need to take extra care of such particular themes. Understood? So this question asks about the taxation system during Krishnadev Rai. Krishnadev Rai was basically the zenith of the Vijayanagar Empire. He was the most famous ruler and most strongest ruler from the Vijayanagar system of empires. So that's why this question becomes very important. This theme becomes very important. The first statement says, the tax rate on land was fixed depending on the quality of the land. Of course, this is right. Okay, and from where we get these kind of informations? Who gave these kind of information? So a very important figure which you need to remember is Domenico Pius. Domenico Pius. Okay, he was a Portuguese traveler who visited Vijayanagar Empire during Krishnadev Rai and other such rulers during that period, and he gave an account of what was the taxation system, what was the revenue system, and what are other administrative systems which were running in Vijayanagar Empire during that period. And that is the authentic source for all these places, because these travelers being foreigner or of foreign origin, they had no vested interest in eulogizing a particular empire. So whatever they wrote, they became a very authentic source for the historians of present day or present times or last 50 years. And they referred these sources to write the basically timeline or the socio-economic status or the taxation system of those periods. So that's why these travelers are very important who gave such accounts in their writings. Okay. So the first statement is tax rate on land was fixed depending on the quality of land. Of course, this is right, because see, if a particular piece of land is very fertile, then it was taxed relatively more than a particular land which was barren by nature. Because a land which is fertile will be able to give high production or high productivity. So it makes sense that such particular land should be taxed more as compared to the piece of land which is not that fertile. Okay, it won't make any sense, and it will be an administrative failure if the particular king starts taxing the whole piece of land with single rate. If he'll do so, then those pieces of land which are not that fertile will not be able to bear the brunt of the high taxation which they had to pay. So that's why this kind of varying or dynamic taxation system was being implemented during the Vijayanagar Empire. And it tells about how progressive they were about the taxation system. See, a particular piece of land being highly fertile and being taxed more, this is basically a part of progressive taxation system. Okay, and that you can see even nowadays also, that a person who earns more has to pay higher tax as compared to a person who earns less money annually. Okay, so this you can compare even during recent times. So that's why this statement is absolutely right. Now what about the second statement? Private owners of workshop paid an industries tax. Of course. See, they were merchant guilds. Okay, they used to run workshops. So these kind of workshops, they of course used the government or basically the administrative's machinery so as to secure we can say a certain level of security for their own business and all those things. For that they had to pay tax. So that's why the private owners of workshop paid an industries tax. They will have to pay industries tax. Okay, like nowadays we have corporation tax. So in the same fashion, during those times, they had to pay industries tax. So that's why the second statement is also correct. So the correct answer is both 1 and 2. Got it? Now let's move to the next question. Now again, first read the question with reference to the economic history of medieval India, the term Arghatta. refers to. Now, in the earlier sessions, I already talked about this particular thing, that some terms, okay, some specific terms are very much important while you're going through your syllabus of the whole history part along with art and culture, because the UPSC has this habit of asking those specific terms. They only talk about those specific terms, that what does this stand for in medieval times or in ancient times or even in modern times. In modern India part, these kind of questions come rarely, but they can still come. Okay, but as far as ancient India is concerned, medieval is concerned, art and culture part is concerned, these questions are quite common. So that's why I've always asked your people to list out these terms and make notes out of them and try to read them every day. Okay, in the morning just go through all these terms so that these easy pickings, these questions are easy pickings. If you have read it even once, then you'll be able to solve these kind of questions. So these easy pickings, these easy 2-mark questions, you'll be able to handle if you make a list out of all these terms. Understood? So this particular question says that with reference to economic history of medieval India, term arghatta refers to, the correct answer is water wheel used in the irrigation of land. Okay, Persian wheel, which basically was used to draw out water. Okay, so the correct answer is this. Okay, there's nothing more to explain in this particular question, because this is a particular term. I already told you these questions are shock value questions if you don't know about them. And if you know about them, there is nothing more to explain about these questions. Understood? So the correct answer to this question is water wheel used in the irrigation of land. Try to make notes out of such terms. I have already told you, and I'll remind you, keep on reminding you whenever I get the chance. Understood? Now the next question is, now this is a very good question. See, try to understand, whenever you read about Babur or Timurid dynasty, which basically progressed into Mughal dynasty in India, we need to understand that what were the changes or what was different about that particular dynasty and what happened when Babur came to India. There were already a lot of powers in India, and what made it possible for Babur to establish a dynasty in India, and how was he able to defeat all his opponents when he came to India. Anyway, such topics are very much concurrent nowadays. You might be hearing about through various news portals about the issues which have come out of whatever accusations have been laid on Rana Sanga and other such figures. Understood? So these questions become very important, because sometimes UPSC does, what basically does is that they ask you such things which of course are part of static part of medieval India or ancient India, but they have been coming in news for last one and a half year or last 2-3 months. They have this habit of asking such questions, so you should be prepared about such kind of questions. Understood? So the first statement said that Babur on his arrival introduced gunpowder in the subcontinent. Now this is wrong. Why this is wrong? He didn't introduce gunpowder. Before him, gunpowder was introduced by Bahmani kingdom. Bahmani kingdom down south, when Babur came, he basically in his Baburnama also, he named 2 people, okay, Rana Sanga and Krishnadev Rai, that these are the 2 most powerful rulers in India. He named them. So in down south in the Vijayanagar Empire, they had a constant conflict with Bahmani kingdom. So initially Bahmani kingdom and even Vijayanagar Empire already used gunpowder before Babur came to India. But what did Babur do different? Babur was able to use gunpowder in an effective way on a large scale against Ibrahim Lodi in the first battle of Panipat. That is the differential which we can find in Babur's take on gunpowder. So that's why this statement is wrong, but try to understand the concept behind it. Okay? What was the second statement? Introduction of arch and dome in the region's architecture. Now again, arch and dome, it is a very key feature of Indo-Islamic architecture. But who brought it? It was brought by Sultanate rulers. Okay, all the Sultanate rulers who came into existence, and they came way before Babur. Okay, Babur defeated the last Sultanate ruler, Ibrahim Lodi, but before that, Mamluks, Khaljis, Tughlaqs, all these came, Sayyids, and then came Lodis. Lodis were Afghans. Okay, so the second statement is also wrong, because Babur didn't introduce arch and dome. But what did Babur introduce? Babur introduced Charbagh system. Okay, the Charbagh system was introduced by Babur only because he was fond of Charbagh. He wrote that in Babarnama also, that he is very fond of Charbagh. It is basically a bagicha kind of system in the middle of which there is we can say fountain and all these things. So he was fond of these things. So he introduced Charbagh system in India, but he didn't introduce arch and dome. Arch and dome was introduced by Sultanate period kings or sultans. Understood? What was the third statement? Establishment of Timurin dynasty. Of course, this is right. Timurin dynasty was established by Babur only. Timurin dynasty only got to be known in later period as Mughal Empire. Okay, from the father's side, they belong to Timur the Lang, or basically the person we can call him Divyang now, but Timur the Lang, he was the person who was the reason behind the establishment of Timurin dynasty, and Babur belonged to that dynasty only. And from the mother side, they belong to Genghis Khan in a way. Okay, so that's why the third statement is correct, and the correct answer is B3 only. Okay, now let's move to the next question. Now again, next question is a term based question. See, the moment I talk about it, we see these kind of questions coming in UPSC exam. We have been observing these kind of questions coming in UPSC pre-exam. So that's why these terms are very much important. Now, it says that in medieval India, the designations Mahatara and Pattakila were used for. Okay, just read this question once. Now, this question basically asks you that Mahatara and Pattakila were used for, the first one is military officers, the second one is village headmen, the third one is specialist in Vedic rituals or chief of craft guilds. Okay, and the correct answer is village headmen. Okay, and if you look into exactly what these two people or these two officials used to do is that Mahatara is of course village headman. He was basically the owner of the maximum piece of land in a particular village, and he was responsible for revenue collection. But there is a difference between Mahatara and Pattakila. Of course, they were both, these terms are used from village headmen only. But Pattakila, as we can look into the medieval India texts like Chola text or Gupta text, we'll find that what we found is that Pattakila was also involved in irrigation related measures. Got it? So Pattakila was also involved in such kind of additional activities, but both of these terms were used for village headmen only. There's no confusion about it. Understood? Now let's move to the next question. Now next question is again, it's a very simple question if you know about it. If you don't know about it, it becomes really hard because there are some confusing things about this particular term, which is Ibadat Khana. Okay, first of all, read this question. Now, let's talk about Ibadat Khana at Fatehpur Sikri. Okay, Fatehpur Sikri was the fort built by Akbar for his own residence and for his court and all. So that's why Fatehpur Sikri is very much important, and this question is asking you about what does Ibadat Khana stand for or use for. So first option says that a mosque for the use of royal family, or second says Akbar's private prayer chamber. Now see, try to understand how UPSC is trying to confuse you all. Ibadat means prayer. Now once it means prayer, so going by a simple notion of understanding what that particular term means, you will get confused between A and B. That it might be a mosque or it might be a private praying chamber for Akbar. But both of these are wrong. Okay, so that's why having the exact information is very much important for you all. And what is the correct information? Correct information is the hall in which Akbar held discussions with scholars of various religions. Okay, Akbar was a great proponent of religious tolerance. So he used to call up all the, we can say religious authorities of Hinduism, of Islam, of Zoroastrianism, of Christianity, of Sikhism, of Jainism. He used to invite all these people and let a debate happen or discussion happen over the religious discourse they all were following. And that is how he was able to implement the policy of Deen-e-Ilahi. Understood? So that's why the third statement is correct, because Ibadat Khana was the place which Akbar built for all these kind of discussions. But if you go by the literal meaning of Ibadat, then you will get confused between A and B, which are going to be wrong. So having exact information about a particular question is very much important before attempting the question, because UPSC has this habit of confusing you all with these literal terms which mean something exactly opposite or very different from what basically that term means. Understood? And the last option is the room in which the nobles belonging different religion gathered to discuss religious affairs. Now see, again, you might get confused between C and D. But what it basically says that nobles belonging to different religion gathered to discuss religious affairs. This is not right. It was not about religious affairs. It was all about religious scholars, and they were not exactly nobles. Okay, they were noblemen from Islam which lived in the Akbar's court, but not the other basically nobles, and they were not even nobles, the scholars of other religion. So that's why the D is also incorrect. The correct answer is C only. Look how UPSC is trying to confuse you all in this question. So you need to have exact information and in-depth understanding and knowledge about all these terms. Okay, now let's move to the next question. Read it once. Now this question says that with reference to the religious history of medieval India, the Sufi mystics were known to pursue which of the following practices? Now the first statement says that meditation and control of breath. This is of course right about Sufi mystics. Now why they used to do this? Why they used to do meditation and control of breath? For inner purity. For inner purity, Sufi mystics used to perform meditation and they used to do control of breath. They believed that through these practices they can achieve inner purity. Understood? Now outer purity is about taking bath every day and having interest into or having care about or giving care to the basic hygiene. But the inner purity can be achieved through these processes of meditation and control of breath. That's what Sufi mystics believed in. Now what about the second statement? Severe ascetic exercise in lonely places. Okay, in lonely places, they used to go, these Sufi mystics, and they used to perform various ascetic exercises. We can compare it to yoga. Okay, so through these ascetic exercises in lonely places, they were able to achieve, we can say, a higher state of being. Without the clutter of the real world, they can achieve then higher level of being going to these places, and that's why these kind of activities are performed by Sufi ascetics. Now what about the last one? Recitation of holy songs to arouse a state of ecstasy in their audience. Of course this is right. You might have heard about Qawwali and Sama. Okay, Qawwali and Sama are sung by Sufi mystics so that they can achieve a higher state of ecstasy, so that can be nearer to their respective gods. So that's why the third statement is also correct. So all these statements are correct regarding the Sufi mystics of medieval India. They were part of the Bhakti period of India also, India only. Okay, Sufi mystics, you can even refer to, there was a huge we can say gathering of Sufi mystics in the Kashmir part of India. That's why you can even find some surnames like Sufi from that region. So that's why all these three statements are correct about Sufi mystics during the medieval India, and the correct answer is D. Okay, so that's it for today's session. If you have any doubt, you can ask on the YouTube channel we have, and we'll be